At dinner with my son's wealthy in-laws, he said, "Mom's between jobs right now." His new wife added with a sweet smile, "Probably forever at her age." They all laughed. The sound echoed around that opulent dining room, cruel, dismissive laughter at my expense. So I laughed too. I laughed right along with them, watching their confused faces as I joined in their mockery of me. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 2 weeks earlier, I'd inherited $47 million from my estranged brother. And 3 days before this dinner, I'd made an offer to buy their struggling family company. The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. My son's voice was panicked, desperate. "Mom, please don't do this to us." But I already had. And I wasn't sorry. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. My name is Lorraine Mitchell and I am 67 years old. I was born in Detroit in 1958, the youngest of 3 children in a working-class black family. My father worked at the Ford plant for 30 years. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in Grosse Pointe, coming home exhausted every evening with stories about the lives of people who had so much they didn't even notice it. "Baby girl," my mother would tell me, "you get yourself an education. You work twice as hard as everyone else. You be twice as good. That's how we make it in this world." I took her words to heart. I was the first in my family to go to college, working 3 jobs to pay my way through Wayne State University. I graduated with a degree in business administration in 1980, ready to conquer the corporate world. The corporate world, however, wasn't ready for me. I applied to dozens of companies. Most never called back. A few brought me in for interviews where I could see the surprise on their faces. They hadn't expected Lorraine Mitchell to be a young black woman. The rejections were polite but firm. "We've decided to go in a different direction. We found a candidate whose experience better matches our needs. We'll keep your resume on file." Finally, I got hired as a secretary at Morrison Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company. It wasn't what I'd dreamed of with my business degree, but it was a foot in the door. That foot in the door became a 42-year journey. I worked my way up slowly, painfully. Every promotion was a battle. Every advancement required me to be not just better than my peers, but exceptional. I had to outwork, outsmart, and outlast everyone around me. Secretary to executive assistant. Executive assistant to office manager. Office manager to operations coordinator. Operations coordinator to operations manager. Manager to director. Director to senior director. Senior director to vice president of operations. Took me 40 years to reach VP. 40 years of coming in early, staying late, missing family events, sacrificing weekends, proving myself over and over again to people who looked at me and saw someone less qualified, less capable, less deserving. But I did it. I made it. Lorraine Mitchell, daughter of a factory worker and a domestic, became vice president of operations at Morrison Industries. And then 6 months ago they took it all away. Restructuring, they called it. Streamlining operations. Right-sizing for the future. What it really was, age discrimination wrapped in corporate language. They offered me an early retirement package, a fraction of what I deserved after 42 years of service. They replaced me with a 35-year-old white man with half my experience and an MBA from a school that hadn't even existed when I started working. "We appreciate your years of service, Lorraine," the CEO said, not meeting my eyes. "But the company is moving in a new direction. We need fresh perspectives, new energy." Fresh perspectives. New energy. Code for "you're too old." I could have fought it. Could have hired a lawyer, filed a discrimination suit. But I was tired. So tired. Tired of fighting, tired of proving myself, tired of being the only black woman in rooms full of people who never had to work half as hard for twice the rewards. So I took their package and I left. For 42 years, my identity had been wrapped up in my career. I was Lorraine Mitchell, VP of Operations. I was the woman who'd climbed from secretary to executive. I was proof that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. And then suddenly I was nothing. Just another unemployed senior citizen in a job market that didn't want me. The first few months were dark. I'd wake up with nowhere to go, nothing to do, no purpose. I'd sit in my modest house in Detroit, the house I'd bought 30 years ago when I finally had enough saved for a down payment, and wonder what the point of it all had been. My son Marcus called occasionally, but the conversations were strained. He was busy with his new wife, his new life. He didn't have time for his unemployed mother and her problems. Marcus was my only child. His father, my ex-husband Jerome, had left when Marcus was 5. Jerome couldn't handle having a wife who was more ambitious than him, who made more money, who challenged the traditional roles he expected. So he left and I raised Marcus alone while building my career. Maybe I wasn't there enough. Maybe I missed too many school events, too many baseball games, too many moments. Maybe Marcus resented having a mother who was always working, always striving, always putting her career first. Or maybe I just raised a son who was ashamed of where he came from. Marcus had gone to college, gotten a business degree like me, and ended up in middle management at Wellington Manufacturing, a family-owned company that made automotive parts. The pay was decent, the job was stable, but Marcus wanted more. He wanted status, wanted to be seen as successful, wanted to escape the shadow of his working-class background. Then he met Amber Wellington. Amber was the daughter of Richard and Constance Wellington, owners of Wellington Manufacturing. She was pretty, privileged, and completely unaware of what real struggle meant. She'd grown up in mansions, attended private schools, summered in the Hamptons, all the things Marcus had never had. When Marcus brought her home to meet me 2 years ago, I saw immediately what she was. A young woman who'd been handed everything and appreciated nothing. She looked at my modest home with barely concealed disdain. She asked invasive questions about my career trajectory and whether I'd ever considered upgrading my lifestyle. But Marcus was smitten. Amber represented everything he thought he wanted: wealth, status, entry into a world that had always excluded people like us. They married 6 months ago in an elaborate ceremony that cost more than my annual salary. The Wellingtons paid for everything, making sure everyone knew it. I sat in the church in my nice but not expensive dress, watching my son marry into a family that looked at me like I was the help. After the wedding, Marcus's calls became less frequent. When we did talk, he seemed embarrassed by me. He'd ask what I was doing for work in a tone that suggested he hoped I'd found something respectable. When I told him I was still job hunting, I could hear the disappointment in his voice. "You'll find something, Mom," he'd say, but he didn't sound convinced. The truth was, I wasn't finding anything. At 67, with decades of experience, I was overqualified for entry-level positions and not the right fit for anything senior level. Age discrimination is illegal, but it's almost impossible to prove. Companies have 1,000 ways to reject older applicants without saying it's because of their age. I was beginning to accept that my career was over. That I'd spend whatever years I had left living on my modest savings and Social Security, slowly fading into irrelevance. And then I got the call from attorney Robert Chin. "Ms. Mitchell? This is Robert Chin from Chin and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Samuel Mitchell. I understand he was your brother." "Samuel?" "My older brother. We hadn't spoken in 20 years. Samuel and I had been close growing up, but we'd had a terrible falling out after our parents died. They'd left a small estate, the family house, some savings, and Samuel and I had fought bitterly over it. He'd accused me of being greedy and materialistic. I'd accused him of being irresponsible and entitled. We'd both said terrible things, things we couldn't take back. Our middle sibling, our sister Teresa, had tried to mediate, but she died of cancer 15 years ago. After that, Samuel and I never had a reason to reconcile. We went on with our separate lives, two people who shared DNA but nothing else." "Yes," I said carefully. "Samuel was my brother." "Was. I'm very sorry to inform you that Samuel passed away 3 weeks ago. Heart attack. It was sudden. I felt a strange emptiness. Not quite grief, we'd been strangers for 2 decades, but a sense of loss for what might have been. For the relationship we'd destroyed over money and pride." "I see," I said. "Thank you for letting me know. Ms. Mitchell, I'm also calling because you're the sole beneficiary of Samuel's estate." I paused. "I'm sorry, what?" "Samuel left everything to you. As his only living relative, you inherit his entire estate." "Mr. Chin, Samuel and I hadn't spoken in 20 years. Why would he leave me anything?" "He left a letter explaining his wishes. Would you be able to come to my office to discuss the details?" 2 days later, I sat in Robert Chen's downtown office, stunned into silence as he explained my inheritance. Samuel, it turned out, had been a genius with money. After our falling out, he'd taken his portion of our parents' estate, maybe $50,000, and invested it brilliantly. He'd gotten into tech stocks early, buying shares in companies that would become giants. He'd invested in startups that became household names. He'd bought property in areas that later exploded in value. Over 20 years, through careful investing and a bit of luck, Samuel had turned $50,000 into $47 million. $47 million. And he'd left it all to me. Why? I asked, reading and rereading his letter. Why me? We hadn't talked in 2 decades. Robert Chin handed me an envelope. He left this for you. With shaking hands I opened it. Lorraine. The letter began in Samuel's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry we never reconciled. The fight we had after Mama and Daddy died. It was stupid. We were both grieving, both stressed, both saying things we didn't mean. But pride kept us apart, and now it's too late to fix it. I want you to know I followed your career. I was proud of you, Lorraine. So proud. A black woman making VP in corporate America? Breaking barriers, shattering ceilings? That's incredible. Mama would have been so proud. I made a lot of money, Lorraine. More than I ever needed. I lived simply, invested wisely, and watched it grow. I don't have a wife, don't have kids. You're my only family. So it's yours now. Use it well. Use it to live the life you deserve. Use it to make up for all those years of fighting twice as hard for half the recognition. Use it to do something that matters. And Lorraine, don't let anyone make you feel small ever again. You're a giant. Act like it. Love, Samuel. I cried then. Cried for the brother I'd lost, the years we'd wasted, the reconciliation that would never happen. But I also cried with relief, with gratitude, with a sudden sense of possibility. $47 million. I could pay off my house. Could buy a new car. Could travel, could donate, could live comfortably for the rest of my life without worrying about money ever again. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. The inheritance needed to be processed, investments needed to be reviewed, accounts needed to be established. Robert Chin connected me with a financial advisor and an estate attorney. We set up trusts, investment accounts, a private holding company. And I waited. I wanted to see how people treated me when they thought I had nothing. I wanted to see who I could trust, who really cared about me versus who just saw me as a resource. 2 weeks after learning about my inheritance, Marcus called. Mom, Amber's parents want to have you over for dinner. A proper family dinner, get to know you better. I was immediately suspicious. In 6 months of marriage, the Wellingtons had shown zero interest in getting to know me. Why no? That's nice of them, I said carefully. When? This Saturday. 7 p.m. It's at their house. Dress nice, okay? Dress nice. As if I didn't know how to dress appropriately. I'll be there. And Mom? Maybe don't mention the job situation too much. They're kind of traditional. They might not understand. Understand what? Being unemployed. They come from a different world. Just try to make a good impression, okay? My son was asking me to hide my unemployment as if it were shameful. As if 42 years of breaking barriers meant nothing because I'd been forced out by age discrimination. I'll be myself, Marcus. If that's not good enough, that's their problem. Mom, please. Just this once, could you not make things difficult? Make things difficult. Because standing up for myself was making things difficult. I'll see you Saturday, Marcus. I hung up feeling a familiar disappointment. My son was ashamed of me. And I hadn't even told him I was a multimillionaire now. That week, I did something I'd been thinking about since learning of the inheritance. I researched Wellington Manufacturing. What I found was fascinating. The company had been family-owned for 3 generations. Richard Wellington's grandfather had started it in the 1950s, manufacturing small parts for the automotive industry. It had been successful for decades, riding the wave of Detroit's auto boom. But in recent years, Wellington Manufacturing had struggled. Foreign competition, changing technology, and poor management had eaten into profits. The company was hemorrhaging money. According to public filings, Wellington Manufacturing was on the verge of bankruptcy. They needed a major capital injection, at least $15 million, to restructure operations and stay afloat. Richard Wellington had been quietly shopping the company, looking for investors or potential buyers. So far he'd had no luck. The company's books were bad enough that serious investors were scared off. But the company employed over 200 people. Good jobs with benefits. Union jobs. The kind of jobs that communities like Detroit desperately needed. An idea formed in my mind. A wild, audacious idea. I called my financial advisor. I want to buy a company, I said. Wellington Manufacturing. I want to know if it's feasible and how to do it anonymously. There was a pause. Ms. Mitchell, buying a manufacturing company is a significant undertaking. Are you sure? I'm sure. The company is struggling but not dead. It needs capital, better management, and a strategic vision. I have the capital. I can hire the management. And I've spent 42 years in operations. I understand manufacturing. This would require substantial due diligence. Then do it. I want to move fast. And I want to stay anonymous. Use my holding company Grayson Holdings as the purchasing entity. Nobody can know it's me until I'm ready to reveal it. Understood. I'll assemble a team immediately. For the next week, my team worked around the clock. They reviewed Wellington Manufacturing's books, assessed assets, evaluated the workforce, and analyzed market position. The conclusion was unanimous. The company was salvageable with proper investment and management. I made an offer through Grayson Holdings. $20 million for 100% ownership of Wellington Manufacturing. It was above market value. The company was worth maybe $12 million in its current state. But I wasn't just buying a company. I was buying an opportunity. The offer went to Richard Wellington 3 days before the family dinner. Saturday evening arrived. I dressed in a nice pantsuit, not too fancy, not too casual. I drove my 12-year-old Toyota Camry to the Wellington estate in Bloomfield Hills, the wealthy suburb where Detroit's elite lived behind gates and manicured lawns. The Wellington house was exactly what I expected. A massive colonial with white columns, a circular driveway, and enough square footage to house 3 families. A maid answered the door and led me to the dining room. The family was already assembled. Richard Wellington stood at the head of the table, a large man in his late 60s with the confident bearing of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. Beside him sat his wife Constance, an elegant woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Marcus and Amber sat together, Amber looking radiant in a designer dress, Marcus looking uncomfortable in a suit that was probably more expensive than anything he'd ever owned before marrying into this family. Amber's brother Derek sat with his wife Jessica. Derek was a younger version of his father. Pompous, self-satisfied, clearly unused to not being the most important person in any room. Lorraine. Constance stood, her smile wide and completely insincere. So wonderful to finally have you here. We've been meaning to do this for months. Months. Since the wedding 6 months ago. Sure. Thank you for having me, I said, taking the seat they indicated, far from the head of the table, clearly marking my place in the hierarchy. Can I get you something to drink? Richard asked. Wine. Cocktail. Water is fine, thank you. Amber leaned toward Marcus and whispered something that made him flush. I pretended not to notice. Dinner was served, an elaborate meal prepared by their private chef. As we ate, the interrogation began. So, Lorraine, Constance said with fake sympathy, Marcus mentioned you're between positions right now? Between positions. Corporate speak for unemployed. That's right, I said calmly. I was with Morrison Industries for 42 years. They decided to restructure. 42 years. Constance exclaimed. My goodness, that's quite a long time at one company. The implication being I'd stagnated, hadn't been ambitious enough to move around. And you haven't found anything new yet? Richard asked, cutting his steak. It's been what, 6 months? About that, yes. That must be difficult, Jessica said, her voice dripping with condescension. The job market is so competitive these days. Especially for people with more experience. People with more experience. Code for old. I'm exploring various options, I said evenly, taking time to consider what I want to do next. At your age, that's smart, Derek said, nodding sagely as if he were some kind of career expert. No point in rushing into something. You're probably looking at consulting, contract work, that sort of thing? Can't be easy to find full-time employment at. He trailed off, but the implication was clear. The important thing, Amber chimed in with a bright smile, is that Marcus is doing so well. He's really established himself here at Wellington Manufacturing. Daddy says he's one of our rising stars. Richard nodded. Marcus has real potential. We're very pleased with his performance. They were praising my son while simultaneously emphasizing that he was succeeding in their world, under their patronage, as if his education and work ethic, which I had provided and instilled, had nothing to do with it. And it's good that he's secure, Constance added. Especially since he's supporting 2 households now. I looked up sharply. I'm sorry, what? Amber reached over and patted Marcus's hand. Marcus has been so wonderful helping you with your bills since you lost your position. He never complains, but I know it's been a strain. I looked at my son. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. This was a lie. Marcus hadn't given me a single dollar since I'd been unemployed. Not that I'd asked. I had my savings and my severance, but he certainly hadn't offered. But he was letting his wife and her family believe he was supporting his mother, taking credit for generosity he hadn't shown, probably to make himself look like a devoted son. Marcus is very generous, I said quietly, watching my son squirm. He learned that from you, I'm sure, Richard said. Though it must be hard going from a career to dependence. That's a difficult transition. Dependence. They thought I was dependent on my son's charity. It's an adjustment, I acknowledged. What sort of work did you do exactly? Derek asked. At Morrison Industries? I was vice president of operations. Silence. Then Constance laughed lightly. Vice president? Well, that sounds impressive. The way she said it made clear she didn't believe I'd actually been a VP. Or if I had been, it was probably some courtesy title without real power. What exactly does a VP of operations do? Jessica asked with exaggerated interest. I oversaw all operational functions: manufacturing, supply chain, quality control, logistics. About 300 people reported to me directly or indirectly. How nice, Constance said dismissively. But surely at your level you must have made good money? Shouldn't you have savings to rely on? It was incredibly rude to ask about my finances, but they didn't care. In their world, if you weren't wealthy like them, you didn't deserve privacy or respect. I have some savings, I said carefully. I'm comfortable. Well, comfortable is relative, isn't it? Richard said, laughing. What's comfortable for some people wouldn't even cover our monthly wine budget. They all laughed at that, including Marcus. The conversation moved on to other topics. Their recent vacation to Europe, the new cars they were buying, the charity galas they were attending. Each story was a subtle reminder of their wealth, their status, their superiority. Then Richard brought up something that made my ears prick up. We've had some interesting developments at the company, he said. Received an acquisition offer this week. Really? Derek leaned forward. From who? Some investment company called Grayson Holdings. Never heard of them, but they're offering $20 million for the company. Constance gasped. $20 million. That's wonderful. It's above market value, Richard admitted. Frankly, it's more than I expected. Our financial situation has been challenging. This offer could solve a lot of problems. Are you going to accept? Marcus asked, concern in his voice. His job security was suddenly in question. Still reviewing the terms, Richard said. But unless something better comes along, yes. We'll likely accept. The company stays operational, all jobs are preserved, and we get a nice exit package. Win-win. He was selling the company that had been in his family for 3 generations, and he looked relieved. That told me everything I needed to know about how bad their financial situation really was. What will you do after the sale? I asked innocently. Retire, enjoy life, travel, Richard said. We've earned it. Let someone else deal with the headaches of running a manufacturing company. Someone else. Someone like me. Will Marcus's position be secure? I asked. After the acquisition? Richard waved dismissively. That'll be up to the new owners. But I'm sure Marcus will be fine. He's competent enough. Competent enough. What a ringing endorsement from his father-in-law. The conversation shifted again and finally, inevitably, came back to me and my employment situation. So Lorraine, Derek said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, what are your realistic prospects? I mean, let's be honest here. Derek, Richard interrupted, then turned to me. What my son means is, at your age and in your situation, what are you actually hoping to find? Before I could answer, Marcus spoke up. His voice was apologetic, embarrassed. Mom's between jobs right now. It was the way he said it. Oh. Like he was admitting something shameful, something he wished weren't true. Then Amber added, her voice sugary sweet with fake concern, probably forever at her age. They all laughed. Richard's booming guffaw. Constance's twittering giggle. Derek's snort. Jessica's polite chuckle. Amber's delighted laugh. And Marcus. My son. My only child. The boy I'd raised alone, sacrificing everything to give him opportunities I'd never had. Marcus laughed too. Not a polite, uncomfortable laugh. Not a forced social laugh. A genuine laugh like what Amber had said was actually funny. They were all laughing at me. At my age, my unemployment, my apparent failure. They were laughing at the idea that I would ever work again, ever be relevant again, ever matter again. And you know what? I laughed too. I laughed right along with them. They looked confused for a moment. They'd expected me to be hurt, offended, diminished. Instead, I was laughing as hard as they were. Oh, you're right, I said between laughs. Probably forever. That's hilarious. My laughter was genuine too, but for different reasons. I was laughing because they had no idea. No idea that I was worth $47 million. No idea that I just bought their company. No idea that their comfortable lives were about to change dramatically. I was laughing because I held all the power and they thought I had none. Well, Constance said, clearly uncomfortable with my reaction, you have a good attitude about it, at least. Oh, I have a great attitude, I assured her. I'm very optimistic about the future. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. More condescension, more subtle insults, more reminders of their wealth and my supposed poverty. Through it all, I smiled and nodded and laughed at the right moments. When dinner ended and I prepared to leave, Amber hugged me with exaggerated warmth. It was so lovely getting to know you better, Lorraine. We should do this again sometime. Oh, we'll definitely be seeing more of each other, I said. I'm sure of it. I hugged my son goodbye. He looked relieved that the evening was over, that I hadn't embarrassed him too badly. Thanks for coming, Mom, he said. I know they can be a lot. They certainly are, I agreed. They certainly are. I drove home in my old Toyota, windows down, music playing, and I laughed some more. Laughed at the absurdity of it all, at the beautiful irony of what was about to happen. The next morning, Sunday, I called Robert Chin. I want to finalize the Wellington manufacturing acquisition immediately. Have all documents prepared for signing by Monday. Are you certain, Ms. Mitchell? Once you sign. I'm certain. And Robert? I want to be at the office on Tuesday morning. I want to meet with the executive team, Richard Wellington, his son Derek, and all department heads. Schedule it as a meeting with the new owner. They still don't know it's you? Not yet. They will on Tuesday. Monday, the acquisition documents were signed. Grayson Holdings officially owned 100% of Wellington Manufacturing. The news was communicated to the Wellington family that evening. The sale was final. The new owner wanted to meet with leadership Tuesday morning. That night I barely slept. Not from nervousness, but from anticipation. I arrived at Wellington Manufacturing at 8 a.m. on Tuesday. The building was a sprawling facility in an industrial area, the kind of place I'd spent my career working in and managing. I knew these spaces, understood these operations. I was dressed in my best suit, still modest, still appropriate, but professional. I carried my briefcase and walked through the lobby like I owned the place. Because I did. The receptionist looked confused. Can I help you? I'm here for the 8:30 meeting with the executive team. Conference room A. Are you with Grayson Holdings? I am Grayson Holdings. Her eyes widened, but she directed me to the conference room on the second floor. I arrived 5 minutes early. The conference room was empty. I took a seat at the head of the table and waited. At 8:28, the door opened and Richard Wellington walked in, followed by Constance, Derek, and Marcus. They were chatting among themselves, not paying attention to the person already in the room. Then Richard looked up and saw me. He stopped dead. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Lorraine. Constance said, confusion in her voice. What are you doing here? Derek looked from me to his father, completely lost. Marcus's face drained of all color. Mom. I smiled at them all and gestured to the empty chairs. Please have a seat. We have a lot to discuss. There must be some mistake, Richard said, his voice uncertain. We're meeting with the new owner of the company. That's correct. You're meeting with me. You. Derek laughed. That's impossible. Grayson Holdings bought this company. Grayson Holdings is my private investment company. I am the sole owner of Grayson Holdings. Therefore, I am the new owner of Wellington Manufacturing. Silence. Complete absolute silence. Marcus looked like he might pass out. This is a joke, Richard finally said. You don't have the money to buy a company. Actually, I do. $20 million paid in full. The transaction closed yesterday. I now own 100% of Wellington Manufacturing. But, how? Constance asked. You're unemployed. I was unemployed, I corrected. Past tense. As of yesterday, I'm the CEO and owner of a manufacturing company. So technically I'm employed again. Funny how things work out. Derek found his voice. Where did you get $20 million? Inheritance. My brother died and left me his estate. I used part of it to acquire this company. This can't be legal, Richard sputtered. The sale was made under false pretenses. No false pretenses. My lawyers handled everything properly. Grayson Holdings submitted an offer, you accepted, documents were signed. Everything was legal and above board. The fact that you didn't bother to investigate who owned Grayson Holdings is your oversight, not my fraud. I opened my briefcase and pulled out several folders. I've spent the last week reviewing every aspect of this company's operations. I've analyzed the financials, studied the workforce, assessed the market position, and evaluated the management structure. I looked directly at Richard. The company is in worse shape than you let on. You're not just struggling, you're nearly insolvent. Another 6 months and you would have been forced into bankruptcy. The employees would have lost their jobs, creditors would have gotten pennies on the dollar, and the Wellington name would have been mud in this industry. Richard's face was red. We were handling it. You were drowning and pretending you could swim. The only reason you're not bankrupt is because I bought the company for more than it's worth. Then you're a fool, Derek said. You overpaid for a failing company. Did I? Or did I acquire a company with good bones, a skilled workforce, and potential for profitability with proper management? I smiled. I've spent 42 years in operations. I know what I'm doing. I pulled out the first folder. Richard, Constance. You're both being transitioned out of the company effective immediately. You'll receive fair retirement packages based on your shareholding in the company, which was 100%, so you've already been paid $20 million. That's more than generous considering the company's actual value. You can't just fire us. Constance shrieked. This is our family company. Was your family company. Now it's my company. And I can absolutely restructure management as I see fit. I pulled out the second folder. Derek, your position as Vice President of Sales is being eliminated. We'll be restructuring the sales department and consolidating operations. You'll receive a severance package, 3-month salary. I suggest you use it wisely. Derek's face went from red to purple. This is revenge. You're punishing us because of what happened at dinner. No, Derek. This is business. Your sales department is underperforming and your position is redundant. The dinner was just the moment I realized how little respect you have for people you consider beneath you. That kind of attitude is toxic in a workplace. I turned to Marcus. He looked terrified. Marcus, your position as operations manager will continue. For now. You'll report to the new VP of operations I'll be hiring. Your performance will be evaluated like everyone else's. If you perform well, you'll keep your job. If not, you won't. Fair. Marcus nodded mutely. The rest of the workforce will be retained. In fact, I'm planning to invest another $5 million into upgrading equipment and expanding operations. This company employs 200 people, good union jobs with benefits. I intend to keep it that way and make it profitable. Richard stood up abruptly. This is outrageous. I'll sue you for what? Buying a company you were desperate to sell? Good luck with that. You manipulated us. You came to our home under false pretenses. I came to your home for a family dinner. You're the ones who spent the evening mocking my unemployment, implying I was a failure, laughing at my age. I didn't lie about anything. I simply didn't volunteer information you didn't ask for. Mom, Marcus finally spoke, his voice shaking. Can we talk? Privately. We can talk later. Right now, I have a company to run. I stood up and gathered my folders. Richard, Constance, Derek, HR will be in touch about your severance and transition details. You have 1 week to clear out your offices and return any company property. Marcus, you'll meet with me this afternoon at 2 p.m. to discuss your role going forward. Wait. Amber suddenly appeared in the doorway. She must have been waiting outside. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. You can't do this. You can't just come in here and destroy our family. I'm not destroying anything, Amber. I'm restructuring a failing company. Your family destroyed themselves through poor management and arrogance. You're doing this because of what I said at dinner. Because I said you'd probably never work again. I smiled. Actually, Amber, you were right. I'll probably never work as an employee again. But as an owner? As a CEO? I'm just getting started. I walked out of the conference room, leaving chaos behind me. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. I met with department heads, introduced myself to the workforce, toured the facilities, and began planning the restructuring. The employees were wary at first. New ownership always meant uncertainty. But when I explained my plans to invest and grow rather than cut and run, I saw hope in their eyes. These were good people doing good work. They deserved an owner who valued them. At 2 p.m., Marcus came to my new office, the corner office that had been Richard's. He stood in the doorway looking lost. Come in, Marcus. Close the door. He sat down across from me, his hands shaking slightly. Mom, I don't even know what to say. Then let me talk. I'm going to ask you some questions and I want honest answers. He nodded. Did you tell Amber and her family that you were helping me financially? He looked down. Yes. Why? Because they kept asking what you were doing, whether you needed help. I wanted them to think I was a good son, that I was taking care of you. I wanted them to think better of me. So you lied to make yourself look good. Yes. At dinner, when Amber said I'd probably never work again and everyone laughed, you laughed too. I know. I'm so sorry, Mom. I was just trying to fit in, trying not to make waves. You were ashamed of me. Tears welled in his eyes. Yes. God help me, yes. I was ashamed that my mother was unemployed, that she drove an old car, that she lived in a modest house. I was ashamed because the Wellingtons have so much and I wanted to pretend I came from that world too. Even though you didn't. Even though I didn't. He wiped his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. You worked your whole life to give me opportunities and I repaid you by being embarrassed of you. I'm a terrible son. Yes, you are. Right now you are. He flinched like I'd slapped him. But you don't have to stay that way, I continued. People make mistakes, Marcus. People get caught up in wanting things they don't have, wanting to be someone they're not. The question is whether they learn from it. I want to learn. I want to be better. Then prove it. You still have your job for now. Show me you can do it well. Show me you can be a man of integrity, not just a man who wants status. Show me you can respect people based on their character, not their bank account. I will. I promise. And Marcus, your wife. His face fell. Yeah. About Amber. She married you thinking you were connected to wealth. Now that her family is out of the company, how do you think she'll react? She's already reacting. She's furious. Blames me for not warning her about you, as if I had any idea. She didn't marry you for love, son. I know that now. His voice was bitter. I thought she loved me. I thought I'd finally found someone who saw me for me. But she saw me as access to her family's company, to a certain lifestyle. What are you going to do? I don't know. I need to think. We sat in silence for a moment. Then my phone rang. I glanced at it, a number I didn't recognize. I should take this, I said to Marcus. We'll talk more later. He left and I answered the phone. Ms. Mitchell. A woman's voice, professional but strained. This is Margaret Harrison. I'm calling on behalf of the Wellington family. What can I do for you, Ms. Harrison? I'm the family's attorney. We'd like to discuss a possible resolution to this situation. What situation? The acquisition of Wellington Manufacturing. The family feels there were irregularities in the process. They'd like to explore options for reversing the sale. I laughed. There were no irregularities. Your clients were desperate to sell. I made an offer they accepted. It's done. They were not fully informed. They were fully informed about everything relevant. The identity of the buyer wasn't relevant. If they'd wanted to know, they could have asked. Ms. Mitchell, I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. Perhaps you'd consider selling the company back. At what price? I paid $20 million for a company worth $12 million in its current state because I saw potential. Now you want me to sell it back? At a loss? I don't think so. The family is prepared to make this difficult for you. Let them try. I own the company legally and completely. Any legal action they take will be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful. I have better lawyers than they do now. I can afford them. I hung up. The next morning, Marcus called at 6 a.m. I was already awake, drinking coffee and reviewing operational reports. Mom, please don't do this to us. His voice was panicked, desperate. Not the voice of my strong, confident son, but the voice of a man whose world was falling apart. Do what, Marcus? This. The company, the firings, all of it. Please, Mom. Amber's family is furious. They're threatening me, threatening Amber. Her father says he'll make sure I never work in this industry again. Her mother is having some kind of breakdown. You're destroying them. I'm not destroying them, Marcus. I'm running a business. But why so harsh? Why fire Richard and Constance? Why eliminate Derek's position? You could have kept them on, worked with them. Could I? The same people who spent an entire dinner mocking me? Who laughed at my age and my unemployment? Who treated me like I was nothing? Those people. They didn't know. Exactly. They didn't know I had money, so they felt free to disrespect me. That tells you everything about their character. They only respect wealth, not people. But Mom, my marriage. Your marriage to a woman who married you for access to her family's company? The same woman who laughed when I said you'd probably support me forever? That marriage. Silence. Marcus, I didn't destroy your marriage. Your marriage was built on a foundation of pretense and status seeking. It was never real. I love her, Mom. Does she love you? Or does she love what she thought you represented? More silence. I have to go, Marcus said, his voice hollow. Amber's calling. He hung up. I sat there, coffee growing cold, feeling the weight of what I'd done. Was I being too harsh? Was I using my new power to punish people who'd been cruel to me? No, I decided. I was running a business. Richard and Constance had been running the company into the ground. They needed to go. Derek's position was genuinely redundant. Eliminating it made financial sense. These were sound business decisions that happened to also address people who'd shown me disrespect. If they'd been competent and kind, I'd have kept them on. They'd been neither. The next few weeks were intense. I brought in consultants to assess operations, hired a new VP of operations with 40 years of experience, and began implementing changes. Some employees were resistant. Change always causes resistance. But most were on board once they saw the investment in new equipment and improved processes. Marcus showed up to work every day, did his job competently, and avoided me as much as possible. I didn't push. He needed time to process everything. Richard and Constance left the company with surprising grace once they realized I wasn't budging. Derek was less gracious. He threatened lawsuits, badmouthed me to anyone who would listen, and tried to poison relationships with suppliers. None of it worked. The industry knew the Wellingtons had been failing, and my reputation in operations preceded me once people learned who I was. The biggest casualty was Marcus and Amber's marriage. 2 months after the acquisition, Marcus came to my office. He looked thin, tired, aged. "She's divorcing me," he said without preamble. "I'm sorry, son. Are you? You predicted this." "Predicting something doesn't mean I wanted it to happen." He sank into a chair. "She said she married the heir to a family company, not the middle manager at a company owned by his mother. She said I'd misrepresented myself." "How did you misrepresent yourself?" "By not knowing you were about to inherit millions and buy the company." He laughed bitterly. "Apparently I should have known that." "Marcus. I've been such an idiot, Mom. I married a woman who never loved me. I spent years trying to be someone I'm not. I was ashamed of my own mother, the strongest woman I know, because she didn't have the right kind of money or status. You were trying to find your place in the world. We all do that." "Yeah, well, I found it. I'm a middle manager in a company my mother owns, going through a divorce from a gold digger, and trying to figure out who I actually am. You're my son. You're Marcus Mitchell. You're intelligent, capable, and learning from your mistakes. That's who you are." He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." Did you buy this company to punish me? No. I bought this company because it was a good investment, because it employs 200 people who need jobs, and because I saw potential. The fact that it also taught you and the Wellingtons a lesson about respect? That was a bonus. A very expensive bonus. I can afford it. He almost smiled. Then, what you said at dinner when they were all laughing, about being optimistic about the future. You already knew, didn't you? About the inheritance, about buying the company. I knew about the inheritance. I didn't know for sure I'd buy the company until that night. Until I saw how they treated me, how you let them treat me. That's when I decided they needed a wake-up call. You laughed with them. When they were mocking you. I laughed because they had no idea what was coming. They thought they were laughing at a powerless old woman. They were actually laughing at their new boss. Marcus shook his head. You're terrifying when you want to be. I'm strategic. There's a difference. 6 months after the acquisition, Wellington Manufacturing was profitable for the first time in 3 years. The operational improvements were working, the new equipment had increased efficiency, and employee morale was up. We'd even landed 2 major new contracts. I called a company-wide meeting to share the news and announce profit-sharing bonuses for all employees. After the meeting, Marcus approached me. Mom, I need to tell you something. What's that? I've been offered a position at another company. Better title, more money. They want me to start next month. My heart sank, but I kept my face neutral. That's wonderful, Marcus. Congratulations. I'm not taking it. Why not? Because I need to stay here. I need to prove, to you, to myself, that I can do good work without relying on family connections or trying to impress anyone. I need to earn my place here. You don't have to stay because... I want to stay, Mom. If you'll have me. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He'd lost weight, but he looked healthier somehow. His eyes were clearer. He stood straighter. Of course I'll have you. But Marcus, you'll be evaluated like everyone else. No special treatment. I wouldn't want it any other way. We stood there in comfortable silence for a moment. I'm proud of you, I finally said. For what? For failing at my marriage. For being a terrible son. For learning. For growing. For becoming the man I always knew you could be. He hugged me then, the first real hug in years. I'm proud of you too, Mom. I should have said that years ago. I'm proud of everything you've accomplished, everything you've overcome. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Better late than never, baby. Better late than never. A year after the acquisition, I stood in the conference room addressing the quarterly board meeting. A board I'd assembled of experienced industry professionals. Wellington Manufacturing had exceeded all projections. We'd grown the workforce to 250 employees, opened a new product line, and secured contracts with 3 major automotive companies. After the meeting, I drove to the cemetery where my brother Samuel was buried. I stood at his grave, looking at the simple headstone. You told me not to let anyone make me feel small, I said to the silent stone. You told me to use the money to do something that matters. I hope you think I did. The wind rustled the trees. A bird sang somewhere nearby. Wellington Manufacturing is thriving. 250 people have good jobs because of what you left me. Marcus is finally becoming the man I raised him to be. Me. I'm not a VP anymore. I'm a CEO. I'm an owner. I'm someone who proved that age is just a number and that being between jobs can actually mean being between one life and a better one. I placed flowers on his grave. Thank you, Samuel. For the money, yes. But more importantly, for believing I was a giant. You were right. I just needed to remember it. Sometimes I think about that dinner. About Marcus saying, "Mom's between jobs." About Amber adding, "Probably forever." About the laughter that followed. They weren't wrong exactly. I probably will never hold a traditional job again. I'll never be an employee, never have a boss, never climb someone else's corporate ladder. Because now I own the ladder. When they laughed at me that night, they saw an unemployed old woman. A failure. Someone to pity and mock. They didn't see the VP with 42 years of experience. They didn't see the survivor who'd fought her way up from secretary to executive. They didn't see the daughter of a factory worker and a domestic who'd shattered every ceiling in her path. And they certainly didn't see the multimillionaire who was about to buy their company and teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives. My name is Lorraine Mitchell. I am 68 years old now. I am the owner and CEO of Wellington Manufacturing. I am a woman who was forced into unemployment and turned it into opportunity. I am someone who was underestimated and used that underestimation as a weapon. I am between jobs no more. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And when they ask me how I did it, how I went from unemployed to owner in a matter of months, I smile and tell them the truth. I laughed when they laughed at me, because I knew something they didn't. The last laugh? That was always going to be mine. The end.